and welcome to the Hybrid School Builders Podcast. I am your host, Rebecca Foley, and I am so glad you are joining me today. I am a fellow grassroots founder who is hoping to make your journey toward founding a sustainable hybrid school a little bit easier. If you are dreaming of starting a hybrid school, or perhaps you've already gotten started, you are in the right place. Join me as we dive into real stories, practical tips, and hard-won lessons that I have learned to help you launch and grow your program with confidence. Remember, building a hybrid school is not just about creating a business or creating jobs. It's not even about just serving the children who attend the program. It's literally about reshaping the landscape of education, and we can do that one community, one entrepreneur, and one program at a time.
Okay, so the last couple episodes, I talked about admissions basics, and then I jumped over into building culture. And believe it or not, hiring connects those two things, right? Our admissions is bringing in our kids and managing the information and all of that, obviously. And our culture is something that's an ongoing, day by day, every time you interact with people, your own attitude, where you place yourself, where you place other people is all part of building culture, okay? Now, hiring the right people is very important for that. And this is hiring the people, just the people themselves, what kind of person you're hiring, but also making sure that you are filling each need with someone who does that job well. Okay, at the risk of stating the obvious, I'm going to say that one more time. You are seeing the need in your program for sustainability and for skill sets that can flourish and can all contribute and work together to build a really high quality program. You have to be able to see what those needs are, and then you have to find the skill set, but also the right person to fill that. And while you're doing that, you're building the culture and you're cultivating the culture, okay? But I'm not going to keep talking about culture in this episode. I'm going to talk about a little bit more practical parts of hiring as far as what to look for in your people, okay? First, however, let me just say that in the growing early parts where you're just kind of trying to get things off the ground and maybe you don't have a lot of money in the beginning, you do have to wear a lot of hats. And I say this over and over and over again, that it's fine to wear a lot of hats. It's fine to have a couple of people wearing all of the hats, okay? Including the ones that don't fit you very well, right? That you're not very good at. But do not head toward that in the long run, because that is a recipe for burnout and you don't want to do that, okay? Which is why it's important to understand your own strengths, your own weaknesses, where you struggle, where you get frustrated, and say, okay, this thing consistently, whenever I have to do this one thing, it's just really frustrates me. It just drains me, okay? You're observing that. It doesn't mean you don't learn new skills, okay? That's not what it means. But it means that if you realize you could better spend your time working within your area of strength and you can hire out that to somebody who is good at it, that's going to be a much more stable, sustainable staffing structure in the long run, okay? So the first job you have is to keep an eye on those needs as you're growing and as you get the resources and as you plan. This is important as you plan. I talk about this in some of the budgeting. You might plan for a system or a staff position that you can't hire right away, but you still plan for it. You still build it into your budget. You still find your tuition based on that number being included, even if you can't hire the position or you can't hire out the system the very first year, okay? You still plan on it. So you have to be able to see those needs, all right? And this isn't like super complex as far as you're not building a huge multi-team with many managers, complex business, right? But if you have a half dozen teachers or a dozen teachers or a couple dozen teachers, you could grow to having several teams. You could have a elementary school, middle school, high school. You could have a Monday, Wednesday program and a Tuesday, Thursday program. You could have an enrichment program. You could end up with multiple programs where you do have multiple teams and you could even have different campuses, right? There's the potential for that in the future. And that might be something you want to do. It might be something you don't want to do. It might be something you don't particularly want to do, but it's the best thing for sustainability. I talk about that in sustainability. Sometimes you kind of have to have the revenue stream in order to have like a secure building location or something like that. And you need to be able to see where those needs are and build a structure that can handle them. All right. I won't get into that again. I'm touching on culture and sustainability again here. But the important thing is seeing the needs. You have to be able to see the needs, and you have to plan to get the resources, and you have to plan to allocate the resources so that you're filling those needs with the systems or the people. Okay. Now, assuming that you're doing that, and as you're growing, you're seeing that and you're heading in the right direction for that, what do you look for in the people that you're hiring? All right. Now, obviously, this is going to depend on what position it is. You want them to be strong in the skill set that you need. Most of the hires are probably going to be teachers working with the children. All right. So I'll just give you a few tips on things that I've observed in the dozens of interviews over the years of meeting with people who were potential teachers or aides. And some of what I've observed have made the best recipe for a really committed person on the team as a teacher. Okay. Now, for a teacher, they are working with kids primarily. Okay. So I think that the number one thing that you need to look for in someone is someone who really has the energy for and enjoys the kids, like they genuinely do. This also depends on the age of the kids, right? Very young kids, a lot more management, a lot more noise, a lot more things, right? Shoes tied and coats on and all of that kind of thing. And that's different than working with 8th or 9th graders, right? Where you're dealing with, silly middle school stuff and that kind of maybe some behavior stuff, but they pretty much can keep themselves alive and go to the bathroom by themselves, right? So it's different skill sets across different ages, of course. In those older grades, a lot of times you want someone who's really passionate about their subject and they have the ability to share that like passion for the subject, for the learning with the older kids. Now, younger kids, you want a teacher there to also enjoy learning and be able to share that with the children, but they also have to be able to manage children and they need to be able to keep order and they need to enjoy the kids. Okay. So I think that especially with elementary kids, the number one thing is someone who really just enjoys kids. How are you going to know this, right? You're going to know this mostly in an interview. You can pick up on some of this through the application process. You're asking what kind of experience they have, what they enjoy doing, what their hobbies are. And people who they just fill their time with children and they just have that passion and energy and the answers to their questions. That's usually a good first sign. But in the interview is usually where you're going to pick up on that kind of energy and enjoyment and passion for the kids. Okay. That's the number one thing. And I think the reason I say that first is because you can't train that into somebody. You can train up almost anything else, but you can't train that into somebody. Okay. Now, the second thing in a hybrid program is, I think, somebody who understands alternative education in the sense of like homeschooling, the partnership with the parents, the fact that the hybrid school is going to be partnering in a very robust way, but isn't the standalone school. The hybrid school, they as a teacher are not responsible for 100% of the child's education and learning. And I say this because if you're hiring someone who's maybe a certified teacher coming from public school, maybe they've taught for 30 years, you think this is an ideal candidate, look at all the experience they have. Sometimes that's actually not a good fit in a hybrid environment because they are so used to doing everything in a particular way and being 100% responsible for the learning of the kids that they have a really hard time transitioning into the shared model that's a hybrid model. They have a hard time realizing that the parent is actually going to be a primary driver in a lot of the education and that they may or may not, depending on how you're structuring things, really be telling the parents what to do. They may not be at all. They might just be doing their own thing at school. Okay. That can be hard to change out of that mindset, but it's not impossible. It's absolutely not impossible. Again, it depends very much on the person. Some people leave an environment like that because they're like, especially younger people in my experience, they're like, I did it for a few years and I just don't like what I have to do or the way that the kids are, how our time's spent or how the management is or whatever. And they're just like, I want to do it some other way. Like, I'm very open to learning in some other way. Okay. So those are the kind of things you want to hear from the person. You want to hear an openness to your philosophy if it's different than the traditional Charlotte Mason or Waldorf, something with a lot of nature time. You want to make sure that they understand that coming in and that you get some feedback both on an application and an interview on what their thoughts are on that. And open-ended questions there can usually give you pretty good insight into their thoughts. If they really are like, maybe they've never even heard about it before, don't write those people off necessarily, because if they did a little research, they read up on it, and they were like, I honestly never heard of Waldorf or Charlotte Mason. I've had people say, well, I never really heard much about this until I saw what you guys were doing, and then I looked into it some more and I did some reading. And also, by the way, you can send them like an article to read or something before you ever bring them in as for an interview, and have them read it and then answer a question about it on the application. That's fine to do. The people who are really interested will read it and they will say something thoughtful about it. Okay. And those are the kind of people you want, right? So that's okay. And to kind of have those like safeguards in place that they have to do some requirements for them. They're like, this makes so much sense. And they give a really thoughtful observation, really thoughtful feedback on it. Maybe they say, man, when I was working in, this school, the kids were never able to be outside. They had 15 minutes of recess and they were always so antsy and blah, blah, blah. And it just makes so much sense. Did you guys have time outside 3 times a day or whatever, right? This is just an example from my experience with the Charlotte Mason program. And you get that kind of feedback and it seems really genuine, where they're like, this is what I've been looking for. This is exactly what we need, right? That kind of passion and interest combined with a love of kids. You can work with that. You can train the little specifics. You can even train some classroom management things. The third thing I'm going to say, though, is someone who has experience with groups of kids is also very valuable. They just have those little tips and tricks for keeping order. Usually they've just learned little ways of keeping order in the classroom, and if they've done that before. But that's, I would say, probably third on the list, because you can teach those things. You can have a more experienced teacher pass along some tips on that kind of stuff. You can learn it yourself, or maybe you already know it if you were a teacher, and you can train some of those things. So it's not a non-negotiable if they don't have that, if they have the energy where they just really enjoy a group of kids and they know how to just jump in and gain some respect with the kids. And they're not super passive or burnt out where the kids aren't going to respect them because they don't know how to take authority. You don't want that. And most adults who have some experience with kids and they have that kind of energy are able to do that with kids, okay? But that's what you're looking for in a teacher, I would say. Now, somebody who's in like maybe an aide position, they don't necessarily have to have all of those skills, but they should enjoy kids because they're going to be working with them. And I think what's most important is that they can see what needs to be done and they just go do it. They're someone who is not holding back and like afraid to step in and help with things. They respect the authority of the teacher. They're not trying to like be the teacher. They're just supposed to be there to help. But they are also able to just step in and like, oh, let me get that for you, or take a kid, or, just step in and help a kid, and they just see what needs to be done. They're able to do it. They fill their time with finding other things that need to be done, sweeping the hallway or checking the bathrooms or whatever, things that need to be done. If there's little gaps, they know how to step into recess and they don't just stand there and chat. They go play with the kids, or they go walk around and interact, and they see what needs to be done. Okay, now how do you tell that? Again, application, you see their experience, and mostly it's going to be in the interview when you're meeting with them and you're asking them questions and you're just giving them a chance to share what their passions are, what their pastimes are, and you're getting in an interview. What you really want to be doing is getting a real feel for this person's personality and passion, as well as in their energy, as well as their experience. Okay. Now, in some of the other positions that you might have to hire for, which are probably going to be more administrative support positions, it might be just a couple hours a week with helping with like secretarial stuff, something like that. Or it might be like someone who's heading up all of admissions, or someone who's managing all of the money management or human resources, or whatever. There's different administrative tasks. You're looking for the skill set that you need in that. Okay, this is the place where somebody who likes a quiet room and a problem to figure out, or organizational skills, and maybe does get overwhelmed with the kids, this is the place for them, okay? And this person is an orderly person, a detail-oriented person. They might need to have a little comfort or experience with certain technology systems, or the ability to figure it out, comfort with money, maybe accounting terms, bookkeeping, that kind of thing, information sorts of management where they can step in and help with those kind of behind the scenes things that can be very time consuming. If it's someone who's like a logistical person, you want them to be able to pay attention to detail, to be organized, to be able to check in with things and just be very present, not somebody like me who's a little bit of an absent-minded professor type and doesn't always just pay attention to things in front of my face. You want someone who's aware, right? They're aware of doors being locked and where the keys are kept and where the tables are and whether all the doors are shut and whether there's mud on the rug or they remember to check the printer and whether it's got ink in, right? If you have a logistical person, you're looking for someone who's very good at and enjoys doing that kind of thing, okay? An event coordinator, somebody who's doing fundraising events or maybe just social events, right? They need to be able to make phone calls and connect with people and enjoy decorating and that kind of thing, okay? So you're looking for that kind of experience in those things. And if you're a nonprofit, some of those might be filled, especially things like fundraisers or event coordinators that might be volunteer. But even with that, you might want to have someone on your staff, whether it's you or someone else who is organizing the volunteers. And they are kind of acting as a liaison between the volunteers and the staff. And they know that that's their job. And they're making sure that it's all getting done well for the reputation of the school. But you do want to leverage your volunteers. You can have so much benefit from a really good couple of volunteers who want to be contributing to the community of the school or helping out, okay? And obviously you're not necessarily selecting those people, but you do want to have the organization in place so that they're able to do what they do well, okay? So the number one thing is definitely for everyone to be pretty bought into the vision and the mission of the program first, to have the energy for whatever it is job that they're being hired to do. And a bit of experience is certainly helpful, but again, you could train a lot of the skill set and make sure, and this is another episode, but make sure that you have trainings in place. You need to be able to have time set aside so that you can communicate to the people, especially teachers, but anybody. You take the time to sit down, say, here's the system I've been using, right? If it's an administrative person, here's the system I've been using. I feel like I got a couple gaps here and there. Do you have any good ideas for this? Or this is the system we've been using and it's working really well. Here's how it works, okay? Whatever that is, you're able to show them, give them a chance to ask questions. Don't just give them the login and expect them to figure it out, unless they already know how to use it and they're just stepping right into it. And with teachers, it's more time. It's curriculum, it's safety. It's building a bit of a team culture with the other teachers. It's management stuff. It's evaluations and accountability and what your process is going to be for being present with them and staff meetings and all of that, setting up the calendars and making sure that they understand what's expected of them, but also that they have the resources that they need. They understand what a day is supposed to look like and what to do if there's an issue. Takes several hours of training for that and make sure you have that in place as well. But it starts with looking for the right skill sets in each of those people, as well as making sure that you're leading well. As a director or, whatever your title is, I'm assuming you're a director or founder, you're the one who's actually delivering on the mission. And it's your job to make sure that the people that you hire are good people, but that they're also trained well and they're supported well to make sure that they're delivering on the mission. They're bought into it. They know why they're there and that you're there to support them to deliver on the mission of the organization. That's your job and you need to be confident in that. And it's okay. It's okay to tell them, this is what we do. This is how we do it. But you're also balancing that with the trust of letting them be who they are and letting them be that well and equipping them to do the job within the boundaries of who they are and what they enjoy doing.
Thanks so much for listening today. Don't forget to subscribe and make sure you check out the resources I am developing at startahybridSchool.com. Send me an email anytime. I would love to hear from you. Until next time.